Hey guys, today I'm going to talk about Model Context Protocol or MCP as it has been gaining a lot of traction lately, and I see a lot of confused people within the space and a dichotomy in terms of opinions where there are people from two sides of the spectrum, some saying things like this is just like function calling and sees no point in it, to others treating as though this is AGI or some kind of breakthrough in AI, which is kind of funny. And it's neither of these two, but I am leaning towards the positive side of the spectrum, and I will explain why. But before that, I want to help you understand just exactly what MCP is, what it was designed for, how it works, and we are going to do this by systematically breaking this protocol down to the components that it is made of and understand what each of them are and how they work together to allow what this protocol does. We will also go through the three phases that I poorly designed to showcase how it works in action at a high level, and once we are done understanding them, I'm going to show you a practical example by demonstrating on Claude's desktop app how you can extend the functionalities of AI models by connecting them to MCP servers, so that by the end of this video, you'll have a solid understanding of what MCP is and how to use it. And with that said, let's not waste any more time and just get to it. So MCP is a protocol that was developed by Anthropic a few months ago, and it's aiming to standardize the way we connect external context and tools to AI models. And the way they describe it is by comparing it to USB-C ports, saying that MCP is like the USB-C ports for AI applications. To understand this better, take a look at this example that I've created here, and let's think of it in terms of plugins. So we have a bunch of plugins here, such as a plugin where we can connect and manage our Gmail account, CRM account, Slack account, or even a database. And these plugins represent a USB-C plug. And imagine we go to Claude's desktop app, right? Because they implement the MCP protocol, it's basically like implementing the USB-C port, which makes it compatible for us to plug in these plugins into this application. And when we do that, what happens is the LLM within the Claude desktop app, which in this case is Claude Sonnet 3.7, suddenly has access to all these tools that you have here as plugins. And now you can tell it to do things such as, hey, could you please go to my database, look for the customers with the highest number of orders, and then create a chart or a diagram out of it, and then send that as a Gmail or even to a group on Slack, and pretty much enhancing our end user experience using these models on these platforms, which I think is super cool, right? Because previously, yes, we have function calling, but to be able to do things like this, what we would have to do was create our own chatbot agents and pass them the tools. So if you've ever worked with building these agents yourself, either through coding or through no-code tools such as N8N, I'm sure you came across the concept of passing in tools to these models so that they can interact with the external world. This is exactly what's happening, but by allowing us to pass these tools as plugins to these applications. And because this is an open protocol, other platforms can also implement it into their architecture. And when they do that, we can start using all of these plugins across all of those platforms, right? For instance, these plugins that we passed into Claude desktop app, now we can just actually take and plug into Cursor IDE and start connecting the agent within it directly to the same exact plugins that we passed into Claude. And this is what they mean by standardizing it and by comparing it to USB-C ports, which is why I think it's a pretty big deal, since it's enhancing our experience using these models by making them more capable and connecting them to different parts of our lives. So I think it's the right direction to move towards as this technology progresses, and I can't wait to see how this whole thing evolves. But now that we understand MCP at a high level, let's actually dig in deeper by looking at the components that it is made up of. Sorry guys, just a quick heads up. I have a Skool community called Business AI Alliance, which is completely free to join. This is a community where we connect through exploring the business applications of AI, share our findings, and help each other grow. I also share all my findings and upload all the resources I show in my YouTube videos here, and we are currently over 1,000 people, so feel free to join if you're looking for the same thing as us. With that, let's get back to the video. So there are three key components in MCP. The first one is the host, the second one is the client, and the third one is the MCP server. So the host is basically just the platform that is hosting the LLM that we are interacting with, right? For instance, Claude desktop app, which we just saw, or the Cursor IDE, Windsurf, ChatGPT, and all of these platforms. The second component of MCP is the client, and you can think of it as a piece of code that acts as a gateway, and what it does is it basically creates a connection with the MCP server or servers, right? And communicates with it. So it would go to the server and say, could you please send me the tools that you have? The server would respond saying, yeah, of course, here are my tools. In this case, you can see there are 4 tools that I added in this example, right? Which is a Gmail based MCP server, by the way. We get these tools, and this client is then going to pass it to the LLM. And when we do that, the LLM now has all the information regarding tools that are available. And when it needs to call it, what it's going to do is going to output a tool call request, which the client then intercepts and then sends this tool call to the server, right? Saying, hey, I want to call your fetch emails tools with the following argument. And then the server responds with the emails, which the client later then returns it back to the LLM. And that's pretty much it. And the client here is actually the USB-C port. So we can get this and paste it here. So what happens is, because the client implements the protocol, it understands exactly how to speak with the server. Since the server is also built on top of the same protocol, so they follow the same rules. And this brings us to the third component, which is the MCP server. You can just think of this as the application that holds the implementations of the tools that it contains, right? For instance, we have a Gmail-based MCP server that's able to fetch emails, label them, send them, or even create drafts. So we create this application as a server, and when we establish the connection with the MCP server just waits for an input by the client, such as a request for fetching the tools or running a function. So the server just waits and listens for these requests and execute them as it receives it. So if we tell it to fetch our emails, it's going to do something like the following: go to the Gmail's API and run this HTTP request, and then return it to our client as a response, which then returns it to our LLM, and finally, which our LLM processes and returns to us as a response. And if you notice, if we want the MCP server to be able to connect to our Gmail account, we'll have to pass in additional information such as the one we have here, an API key or a client ID and stuff, right? And that is what we handle in the configuration phase, and we're actually going to be looking at that now. So phase 1 is about configuration and connection, where we'll start by passing in the JSON configuration object. And if you've never worked with JSON and don't understand it, don't worry about it. You won't have to like write this yourself, but it will be provided to you. And in most cases, you'll just be given a command that you can run in your command line that will do everything automatically for you, right? It's going to just automatically configure your host application, in our case, Claude, directly without you having to do anything other than just pasting that command. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do that in just a bit. But before we get there, let's understand what this command object is made of, right? You can see that it's a dictionary called MCP servers with the connections that we want to make, or the servers that we want to connect to our LLM. So there's a command field that says npx and another args field that is an array of arguments, okay? And npx is just a command to run npm packages. And if you don't know what npm is, think of it as a repository where developers are able to share and install JavaScript based project libraries. There's also one for Python called UV, pip, right? These are all repositories where developers are able to share their own work. So what we are doing here is we're essentially telling it to run an npm package, and we are passing the name of that package inside this argument array here. In this case, it's called Gmail MCP. This is basically the ID of the project library that we want to execute, right? Obviously, this one is just imaginary. I came up with it for this example. And in reality, we'll have an ID of a real project library. The second argument inside this is called API key, which just actually indicates that the next item in this array is the API key. That's pretty much it. So you can see that we have a completely random string for our API key here. But yeah, so this is basically what the command object is made of. And this is the first part of the configuration, right? When we do that, we pass this configuration object to our host, which then passes it to our client, and the client reads that configuration object to run this command here that we see to establish a connection, or more specifically, a standard input-output connection with the following MCP server that we just executed. By the way, just for your information, in case you get confused, the host application is running on our computer, right? So when we run the Claude desktop app, it's running on our computer, and the client runs within the host. So the client too runs within our computer, and then it runs this execution command, which executes the Google MCP project library, which too runs in our computer. So what's happening is we are having a local execution where everything is running within our computer and nowhere else, right? And that's how we are creating a standard input-output connection without using any kind of network connections or ports or WebSockets, right? So as a result, this MCP server will be running in the background and will continuously listen to this stream and wait for any requests made by our client. So with this, we establish a connection between the client and the MCP server. And now we're going to look at phase 2 to see what happens next. All right, now that our client is connected to these MCP servers, the first thing our client is going to do in phase 2 is to get the tools that this MCP server provides. In this case, you can see that the first thing that happens is our client sends a list tools request to our MCP server, and then our MCP server responds with the tools that it has. Obviously, in reality, it's more detailed. It will provide the description of each tools and also the input schema and so on, right? So our client receives this from our MCP server and then passes it to our LLM as tools, just in the same way that we would pass it when we build our own agents, right? So as far as our LLM is concerned, he has access to all of these tools and it has no knowledge about this protocol or whatsoever. It just outputs the tool request saying, hey, I want to use this tool, while in reality, our client routes this request to the MCP server and then fetches the response and passes it back to the LLM. To the LLM is just like getting the tool response, and it's going to work just the same way as it does, right? So you can see how the confusion regarding the function calling part, where they say, oh, this is just like function calling, is a confusion, because this is not trying to replace function calling, but to enable us to call functions through these platforms. And now that we understand this, let's go to the third phase, which is calling tools, and it's as straightforward as, you know, fetching the tools, right? So now that the LLM knows what tools are available, what we can do is we can send it a message as a user telling it, hey, could you please send an email to john@example.com? And the LLM at this point, because we already fetched the tools and passed it to it, knows about the existence of these tools, so it knows that it can use this send email, right? So what it does is it creates a tool call output, and the name of the tool is send email, and these are the arguments. So we have the address, subject, and content. The client intercepts this and then turns it into the tool call request, forwards this to our Gmail based MCP server with the name of the tool it wants to call and the arguments. Our MCP server receives this request and then processes this by connecting to the Gmail API using our API key or whatever credential we need to connect to Gmail, right? It does that and then it gets the response from the Gmail API and then returns that response to our client, which then returns it back to our LLM. Now our LLM knows that we already sent the email, so now it responds to us by saying, hey, an email has been sent to John. And that's it really, right? By the way, this is just the tools functionality of MCP. You can also do two other things currently, such as retrieval of different kind of resources from the server. For instance, you can fetch files from them, or even prompt templates that you created for different kind of scenarios. But I'm not going to get into that, since currently most of the platforms other than Claude only supports tool, and to me this is the most crucial aspect of the whole protocol anyway, so I'm just going to leave it at that. But the idea is basically the same. And finally, now that we understand how this protocol works, we can start looking at an example using the Claude desktop app. Let's get to it right away. All right, so you can either build your own MCP servers or just use the ones that has been built by the community. And here, for example, we have Smithery. It's a repository for MCP servers. There's another one called Pulse, again also a repository for the same thing. And for this video, I'm going to be using Smithery. And I want to make you aware of a very important caveat, is that when you're using community built MCPs, make sure to use the ones that are legitimate, because these can literally be built by anybody, right? And if you accidentally use the one that was built by somebody with a malicious intent, that person at the very least would be able to steal your API key and start incurring costs on your end. So again, make sure to be very careful when you pick these servers, right? A good rule of thumb in my opinion is to use the servers that has high amount of usage and is supported by the community. Like for instance, here we have a featured sections, and we can see that this one was used 120,000 times last month, so this should be safe, right? And then we have GitHub. I'm not sure if this was built officially by GitHub, because the better thing to do is to use the officially built MCP servers by the companies that you are trying to use the services of. And currently, because this is not yet an industry standard and it's relatively new, we don't have plenty of official MCP servers. But as this gets adopted, if it gets to the point where it becomes an industry standard, then you can expect to see companies building their own official MCP servers, just like how we have APIs where we can connect to their services, right? And it's going to be the exact same thing for AI applications, again, if this becomes an industry standard. But with that out of the way, I'll just leave it up to you to go explore on your own, of course, with the caveat of being careful, right? But I'm just going to set this sequential thinking MCP into my Claude desktop app, and let's see how I can do it. So this page appears, and to the right we see an installation section, and you can see how for different platforms we have different ways of installing it, right? And this says use this server with Claude desktop. And to use this, I'm just going to copy this command that it creates for us. I just have to go to the CLI and paste this command. But before that, let's go to our Claude desktop app. All right, so this is what the Claude desktop app looks like without any kind of configuration, right? So let's head over to the configuration file that I showed in phase 1, where we pass in the configuration. To do that, I'm gonna head to this top left corner and then click on File, and I click on Settings. In the settings, I'm gonna go to the Developer tab, and here you'll see a button that says Edit Config. I'm gonna click on Edit Config, and when we do that, we find ourselves in this directory, and I'm gonna click on this JSON file here that says Claude desktop config. Now you can see that it's empty because we have no kind of configuration or connection to any kind of MCP server. And remember when I told you we won't even have to do it ourselves in most of the cases, and that's what I'm gonna demonstrate here basically, right? I'm gonna head over to the command or run this command prompt, and in here I'm just gonna paste what we copied on Smithery, right, for this MCP here, server sequential thinking. And now I'm just gonna click on enter, and let's see what happens, right? So it starts processing it, and as soon as it processes it, what it does is it's actually going to update this file for us. It's still empty, but it should update, and as you can see now, we have it done for us automatically. I didn't even have to do anything. I just ran that single command, and now my Claude desktop is connected to that MCP server, and I can start using Claude 3.7 with this new tool. So let's try it out, and for this I'll have to restart the Claude application. This is how it looked like before the configuration, right? Let's see what's gonna happen when I restart the application. And there we have it. This basically indicates that we successfully connected to the MCP tool, and apparently this server has only a single tool. That's why it says 1 here, right? If it had 3 tools, that would be 3 beside the hammer emoji, and currently we have 1. So let's just test it out. Honestly, I have no idea what to even ask it, but I'm just gonna do something very simple for demonstration purpose, right? Use sequential, let's say use sequential thinking and count the letters in strawberry. Let's see how it does it. So you can see that it actually ran sequential thinking, and it's asking us for permission in order to be able to execute this. This is a security measure. Since it's relatively new, I'm just gonna say allow for this chat, right? Let's see what happens. So it's saying running for this is what's going on. I'm not sure what's exactly happening, but it's supposed to be some sequential way of thinking through a problem, right? So it's doing its thing. So this is basically the result of using this tool that we just added, and I was like, wait, it doesn't even work. But then I realized how dumb I was, because I accidentally asked it how many letters strawberry has instead of how many R's are there in the word strawberry, right? But it's okay, at least I was able to show you how this works. For the second example, I want to do something cooler where I'm going to use an MCP server that will connect to my SQLite database. The database contains 3 tables, which are customers table, products table, and the orders table, and the records across all these tables are connected. For example, a customer is able to purchase a product. When they do that, it's going to create a record in the orders table. Inside the orders table, it's going to have the product ID and the customer ID. So this way we can know which customer ordered which product. So after connecting this server, I'm going to tell Claude to run certain queries and gain insights from my data, right? I'll be able to learn things like which customer has the most amount of orders, or which product is the most expensive product, or which customer spent the most amount of money, and so on, right? And the way I came up with this idea is when I was learning about MCP, I came across this documentation, right, which walks you through the whole process of installing the SQLite database, creating the tables, inserting the records, and so on. And in their example, they just had products, but to make my example more detailed, I just added 2 other tables so that we can run some more advanced queries by joining records from different tables. And this is the configuration that they shared in order for me to add this MCP server to Claude. By the way, I'm going to be adding the link to this documentation in the description so you can also try it yourself. It doesn't only end with this. It has another example where it shows how you can create an MCP server that connects to your file system and so on. So it's really cool. Anyway, I'm just gonna copy this configuration and I'll show you how to manually add it into the configuration file. Just now we saw the example of running the command for it to do it automatically, right? Now we're just gonna go over to the Claude application, go back to the file, then click on settings, right? In settings, go to the developers tab and then click on edit config, go to the Claude desktop configuration file, and I'm not going to remove the previous tools so that we can just add on top of this, right? What I'm going to do is I'm just going to add the configuration for this new MCP server here. Here we have an input parameter that says DB path. And as we discussed in, I think, phase 1 of the examples, what this basically means is it's indicating that the next argument is going to be related to me passing it the path to the database, okay? In my case, it's users and then user, then desktop, okay? Oops. And finally, it's storedb.db. Let's hope this works. If not, I'll have to double check the path to the database. But I'm just gonna save this file now, and then I'm going to restart Claude. All right, perfect. So I just restarted it, and now we can see the new tools appear. And previously, if you remember, we had only 1 tool, right? Now we added 6 more tools to our toolkit, and these 6 tools are all from, as you can see from the label here, from server SQLite that we just added. And now let's take a look at what we can do. First, I'm gonna say, can you please list all the tables in SQLite? Okay, let's see what it's going to do now. Okay, I'll help you list all the tables. Again, it's asking for our permission. I'm just gonna allow it. Here are all the tables. As I told you, we have customers, products, and orders. Right now, let me ask it to find me. Can you find me the customer that has the highest number of orders? Okay, let's see. With the highest number of orders, again, it's asking me to allow, and let's see what happens. It has to be 14, by the way. Okay, it's doing it now. I'll run a query to find, it's running multiple queries to find this. So it's Ellis Johnson, customer ID 1 with total orders of 14. Oh, great. Can you please tell me how much does all of her order equates to, and is she the person with the highest amount of spending? So I'm asking it to do not only one thing, but 2 things to see how much all of her orders equate to and whether or not she's the highest spender. Let's see what it does. So it's running the queries to find out about this information. She is not, by the way, from what I remember. I think she's the second one. Okay, we'll have to find out. And you can see that it did exactly that. So Alice Johnson's total spending across all her orders is $6,000. However, she's not the person with the highest amount of spending. That would be Bob Smith with $7,000. And I'm basically able to just speak to my data at this point. And just like the example we discussed in the previous section, we could also add other tools like Gmail, Slack, CRM, right? We could have told Claude to create a diagram or a bar chart out of the findings and then send it as an email to somebody through Gmail or send it as a message to a group on Slack. And the possibility is just limitless, right? So that's what, in my opinion, makes this exciting. The fact that we are able to just plug and play different tools into these commercialized chatbots is just going to make the lives of the end users much easier, in my opinion, at least. And like I said, this is still currently being adopted by the industry. We are not sure yet if it's going to become an industry standard, but based on what the progress I'm seeing, how platforms are actually adopting this and starting to support this protocol, I actually think that this is going to become an industry standard unless somebody comes up with a more efficient way to do whatever we are doing now. Time will tell, but as individuals, we need to always improve ourselves and inform ourselves about these changes so that we can adapt to it and always stay at the head of the curve. And yeah, that's what I think. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope I was able to explain the concept at least in an understandable way. And I would like to take this opportunity to ask you guys your opinions now. What do you think about this technology? Do you think it's going to become an industry standard? And what use cases can you think of that would benefit from this protocol? And with that question out of the way, I'm gonna wrap up this video. Feel free to join my community again, Business AI Alliance. Take care, guys. Have a good day.